have
That.
I literally walk into a lecture with a magic wand. That's how fun my
Really?
lectures are.
So it's like Harry Potter. You're at
It's
the
definitely
School of
Harry Potter.
Magic. I love
Why
that.
not? Let's have some fun. People have lost the magic because they've tried to make it into science. If you don't believe in magic, then you won't have a magical life.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today I have Carole Sawo on with us. She has had a near-death experience, or maybe a few, and as well as other spiritual experiences. So we're gonna talk deeply today with her. But thank you so much, first of all, Carole, for being on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
I really appreciate it. I always love when I have people from the UK as well, because I get a little taste of different accents. And so I had kind of I had a whole bunch of people that were from the UK that I was interviewing all at once. For some reason, everyone put in the schedule at the same time, and then it went back to more the North American kind of side of things. I was like, oh, I'm missing the UK accents. And now here we go. You're
I'll
back.
do my
So
best.
so I appreciate being here. I always ask everybody just from the beginning if you can explain a little bit now. From the information I got from you, you've really lived a life of spirituality. There's been a lot of spiritual experiences throughout your entire life. If you can think back to any time, maybe there is not a time when that wasn't present in your life, but I'm trying to see when things shifted for you. And if they didn't shift for you, if you can kind of give me a little bit about who you are, even as a child, or just kind of shifting into kind of the life that you're living now.
I think, in my experience, and with quite a few people that really are authentically spiritual, they start the moment you're born, really. And so I think I always had spiritual experiences, but didn't recognize them as such when I was very little. But around the time when you become to get a bit conscious of yourself and the world, so sort of 10, 12 years old, I remember becoming aware of not telling people about what I was experiencing, what I was seeing, what I had begun to understand what I could do with my mind, communication in other frequencies. And of course, as a little girl, I didn't know sort of the comprehension of that, but I just knew to keep it kind of private. So it has always been with me. So I would say early spiritual experiences started before 10 years old, really. And then I was really into, I spent really a childhood mostly on my own. So then I disappeared into books and into poetry and into creativity. And I'm massively creative even now. And then, I went along and got sucked into to society like most of us do,
Mhm.
and sort of forgot about it and thought I'd better get my head down and get a job. But sort of really strange and bizarre experiences happen. They always have happened. And then I returned to exploring that connectivity in my early 20s. And then it just got more and more incredible from there. And so now I'm an author and a lecturer in metaphysics, forensics, and psychology, psychoanalysis. And so what's been interesting is those early experiences that I had. If I'd have gone straight into academia and not had any spiritual experiences myself, I'd have gone into the category of thinking everybody was making it up, or they're just hallucinating,
Mhm.
or they're having some kind of disorder. And I thank God, because he showed up when I was about 5 years old. Thank God that I already knew of I'd had direct experiences. So I wasn't being influenced. I wasn't being told. In fact, I come from an environment where spirituality was not, it wasn't discussed.
Mm.
And so it was purely an internal realization. And I'm so pleased that for me it happened that way, because I see now when people have a spiritual experience, especially a man perhaps who hasn't got any framework to integrate that into his mind, a lot of people are struggling. No, my whole life has been spiritual, I'd say, and then it upgraded to mystical, truthfully.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's interesting. A few of the things you just talked about is how you didn't get too caught up in academia in regards to. So, for instance, for me, when I went to university, I really got into psychology. I loved it. I actually loved it. I loved I loved psychology. I loved the brain, the mind works and all these things. But I always knew there was something else as well. Like we can't, it's almost like we had an answer to everything until we didn't have an answer to everything. So there was only so much that could be explained through psychology. And I always remember thinking that while I was in class. I dealt with anxiety growing up, and I even did a little mini lecture for my teacher and everything on how I dealt with anxiety. And but we would dig into things, and every once in a while I would be the one always putting my hand up asking, but what about this? But you're
Yeah,
the same way. And I would always be,
annoys them.
yeah, and I'm sure it did annoy them. It's just I could never get to that ending. They'd always have this clear-cut ending, and I'd say, yeah, but this and this and this.
Hmm.
And that's because I was also spiritual growing up, but in a different way. I didn't really have any experiences until a little later on in my life. But it sounds like you had a little bit more of that. Did you
Hmm.
sense things, or could you dig in a little deeper about the kind of experiences you would have had as a child?
Sure. I mean, I didn't know before this interview that you studied psychology. So, as a lecturer in psychology, I'm so excited.
Oh, great.
But also, I'm unusual in my teaching, and this is why I created my own college, because academia, like you said, reaches a level and then they don't want to go any further. Or, don't ask, I was told not to ask too many questions. And that's the point. I thought I've got to leave this tribe behind because there's more. I know there's more. I've experienced more. And I need to also help people with that. So when I'm lecturing, I can lecture in across the disciplines from psychology, a degree in psychoanalysis, philosophy. I write in metaphysics. I've been teaching forensics for 15 years. So all of those disciplines do come together, especially I look at energy exchanges, and you mentioned anxiety. And one of the things that I've created is anxiety isn't what we think it is, it's just misdirected energy, actually.
Mm.
And so, anyway, we won't go into that. So, unless you want to, but my experiences, so I was in a very traumatic experience when I was about 5 years old. And I remember it very clearly, but I didn't understand it at the time. And I remember looking up and I thought I saw in the sky, I thought I saw the face of God. Now, I come from a very um, unreligious, unspiritual family. And so I knew not to mention that I'd seen God,
Right.
but I also didn't know what that meant. I was 5, and I just filed it in my mind. So then let's fast forward to when I was 10. A lot of my experiences have been quite traumatic actually in my life. And I've, thank God, connected with spiritual guidance to navigate those. And so another one happened when I was about 10, and I was watching a door handle. And I remember thinking, I wonder if I can move the handle. And then it became a burning desire because there's more to this backstory actually, so I won't tell you. It's a personal experience, but I was motivated to open this door, and I just connected with something like a higher consciousness, and the door handle started turning.
Mm.
And I've done that. That's telekinesis. So by the time of 10, I'm doing telekinesis, and still I didn't know what I was doing. Um, but I keep saying it, but thank God for that connectivity, especially in our world today. And every time it doesn't make sense, I just go back there where it does make sense because it always has. Our world's kind of crazy at the moment, but
Right. Wow.
yeah, that communication and then non-verbal communication. And then in psychology, you see, I was amazed to find that in psychology, you don't actually study things like schizophrenia and Freud and Jung. And I was stunned. I got a whole degree and didn't know. So then I
Wow.
went into psychoanalysis And then I saw parallels between people's works, and I was told, well, you can't, Freud's Freud and Jung's Jung, and there's no comparison. And I said, no, but there is a sequence where they're talking about the same thing. And then I realized everybody is talking about the same thing.
Right.
And then so I became kind of multilingual in spirituality and philosophy and all these different subjects, but they're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, and that's also in regards to religion. A lot of the times you hear about all the different religions, and they, and I even see it sometimes in the comments where there might be discussions, or I don't want to say arguments, but people are saying this or that, and I'm thinking you're saying the exact same thing. You're just saying it in a different way,
Yeah.
because it's surrounding the religion that you were raised into. I did have the Freud teachings. We did learn about different things when I was taking psychology and things like that. But I also want to step in and just say I had a similar situation. This is really fascinating because I've never had anyone bring up the fact that they were moving things with their mind, because this could probably be right out there for some people, but for my general audience, they probably love this stuff. But I remember when I was around 16, I started getting really, I wanted to understand more, right? Because here I am going through anxiety. I'm trying to figure out what is the point when I die? Do I just turn to dust? Like what is all this? I just couldn't stop my mind from thinking about it. I always mention on my podcast, I would look at my hand and be confused. I would say, I'd be, what am I doing? I was like that constant why or how started moving. And then I'm
I
in a
totally understand that.
completely different, I'm not here. And I started doing all these different researches, and I started researching different things on how to, I don't know where it came up, but you took, a little thumb pin you put into a board, you take that and you put a piece of paper on it. And I don't know where I learned this, but I put the piece of paper on this little thumb piece, and I would just stare at it, and I would tell it to move. And I would do this and it would start moving. And I got so good at it. I remember at the time I just got one of my first jobs, and it was in one of these call centers. And I went in, and I'm in the call center, and I'm on the phone, and I'm doing this. And this girl that was beside me in another cubicle, she saw me doing it. And she kind of tapped on my shoulder and said, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh no, she's gonna think I'm crazy, right? And then I eventually told her, I said, watch, I can move. And she's like, how are you doing? And then she started trying, but she couldn't do it. And she's like, I don't know how you do. Are you blowing on it? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no. And I would just put my hands like this. And I was using energy, whatever that is. I don't understand it. It was the only time I've ever got into that. But it confused my mind. I was like, how am I doing that? Like, you know, but we are more than a simple thing I say to people is if you take a magnet, because a lot of people don't believe that something can exist if you can't see it. Like, but if you take a magnet and you turn the magnet around and there's that force, you can't put the magnet together, right? Like I'm using that as just a simple analogy. How are you doing that if there's nothing there? Why is it stopping it from coming together, right? That's energy, right? So the point is there's something, and when I bring that up to people, they're like, oh yeah, I never really thought about that. I just did that as a kid. I didn't really think anything of it. I'm like, yeah. Or how do you have Wi-Fi? You can't see Wi-Fi, right? You can't.
All of my lectures for the last 20 years, I've been talking about invisible things.
Right, exactly. Right.
I've been teaching invisible things. I mean, one of my videos on my YouTube channel is solving the code of the universe, and I really have solved it, but people can't see it, so it's quite annoying. So I've put it there, and you know what it's like in 50 years or 100 years when I've gone. They'll go, oh my God, that girl really knew, because I've expanded the window of human perception in it. And so it is all energy and frequencies and vibrations. And your story of you looking at your hand has reminded me, I was at university with this man who declared himself, he said he'd been told by psychiatrists he's got psychological disorders. And I said, well, why do you think that? It's because I looked at my hand and it vibrated until it disappeared. And I said, and he said, well, they've told me, I've got this dissociative, et cetera, et cetera. I said, right, well, first of all, have you read the Celestine prophecy? Because that is all about vibrational frequencies. I actually feel a bit sorry for today's spiritual inquirer, because now online is a soup of plagiarism, of saturate. We've reached saturation now.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day, you see, I was reading 30 years ago some core text, the original text, and you also mentioned religion. And so, well, this might start some controversy in your chat, but let's do it. I'm about to present a video on how the Bible and the Quran are not religious books at all. They've been hijacked by religion, but they're actually metaphysical books on states of consciousness. So I'll flesh that more out in a video. So it's like really, I'm really kind of leading the field on raising perception. And my motivation is, when people have these experiences, they're medicated. Now, you don't medicate a psychological experience. Why? I just don't get that. I'm just to say, one of my degrees is an honours degree, so I understand statistics and studies, and I've seen nothing that leads me to believe that the mind needs medicating.
Mm.
And I think it needs educating. And the word educate means to lead out. And so that's my kind of main aim. And that's why I'm so vocal with these kind of things. They're not beliefs, they're experiences. You did that with your mind. I believe you.
Yeah.
You don't need to convince me, because I can do it myself. So, we're on the same bus.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I could tell you were kind of like, okay, and if I said that to 10 of my friends, they'd be like, oh, okay. There'd
Mm.
be some kind of reasoning. Again, the girl that was sitting beside me said, you're blowing on the paper. That's how you're doing it. And she was arguing with me. And I said, I'm not. I'm communicating with it. And it sounds so bizarre, but I was doing this and I was only about 16, 17 at the
Yeah.
time. And so, not when you're at that age, that's kind of like that teenage age where you're invincible. No one can really tell you you're doing something wrong. You're just doing whatever. I didn't have that, as I kept going into it. This is my experience as I kept getting into spirituality, even though I would learn something new about it, then my adult brain would say, like my logical mind would come in and trying to break that
Yeah.
apart.
Yeah.
And actually, it's going to lead into a question I had, because you just talked about the medicating thing and all these things, and you also talked about energy. Before we get into any near-death experience stuff, I just really want to know this now, because
I'll
now
get
that I
there.
know that you're in this area, this realm, when we talk about the mind-body connection, because I really think this could actually have something to do with what you're saying. People have ailments, diseases,
Mm.
things in their bodies that are going on, just different ailments and things like that, right? And
Mm.
I'm really truly starting to understand it a bit better as I go through through my life,
Mm.
that we harness energy in
Mhm.
our bodies that lead to these ailments. I
That's
don't know if
correct.
I know that for sure, but I feel that based on my own experiences. I've had ailments that I've pretty much almost wished away once I convinced
Exactly what you
myself
do.
of something.
You're in
Um,
psychosomatic medicine, actually, if you don't know it. This is, in my field, this is known for years and years. So,
yeah.
so every manifestation of a physical or a psychological disorder can be, the genesis can be traced back to the unconscious mind. So where I am very fast in helping people break through like years of worry and stress and not sure what's going on, is they'll tell me all their issues, and then I say, no, that's not the issue. The issue is this. And so, like, for example, if you started getting, just as an everyday example, if you started to get a pain in your neck, I would say to you, instead of going to the chiropractor, I would say to you, who in your life is being a pain in your neck? Because, and then you'll say, oh my God, actually, I'm, this person I started working with. And so deal with the real problem. And the real problem is always in the subconscious mind. And
Mhm.
so the body is just a whiteboard. So when you have something manifest in your body, the question is, where in my mind has this come from? So
Mhm.
what's unhealed and what is diseased in my mind. And then you do literally exactly what you've just said. You go back into your subconscious mind and say, okay, I've recognized this, so I am denying this disease. And you can't just deny something, you've also got to then replace it, because what you focus on gets bigger. So then you say, and now I'm well, and this now goes into the realm of manifestation, and which a lot of people are getting excited about at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and as I was saying, I think we manifest these things into our bodies, and then and again, and then at the same time, I would say to everybody, if there's something seriously medically wrong with them, to get it checked out. But there are
Sure.
different ways that we can approach these things. And I think we're getting closer and closer to understanding it's not just feed yourself medicine to
Yes.
band-aid up the issue. There's deeper issues within our bodies that we're not coming to terms with. We are taught in society to push everything down throughout our entire life.
Yeah.
Keep going, keep working, keep
Yeah.
pushing, just keep pushing. And if we're not dealing with the things that caused us those ailments, right?
So you go to work to earn the money to buy the medication to keep going to work. Whereas if you just stopped and got off that silly treadmill, and well, I know not many people speak in the language that I speak, so I kind of walk right down the middle. I'm a smart cookie, really. So I'm not lost in airy fairy spirituality.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I'm not lost in logic either. So I walk a very steady, central path. So yes, if it's serious, of course you would go and ask the doctor's opinions. But I, kicking and screaming, don't take medication because they have to convince me. And I've heard so many stories of doctors that have been given misdiagnosis, and especially in psychiatry, which is I get cross about that. Because the difference is knowledge. If somebody says to you, well, actually, just try this first. Why don't you just try this first? But
Mhm.
I understand people like labels, and I understand they like medication, but I'm not a fan of either of that, because you just sign up for the matrix.
Mm. Oh, I like how you said it. I'm gonna write that down. So,
I'll come out with these things. Apparently, they're called charisms. My students say I come out with these random
yeah, that's a good one.
terms. Yeah.
They're good
So
when you're trying
logic
to.
is the matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely understand what you're saying. One thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned another thing about saturation. I've noticed
Mhm.
that too. When I first started into, again, uh, you know, not to get too deep into what I've gone through, but just the near-death experience obsession I've had when I was young was
Mhm.
because I was trying to figure out my own life and the purpose and what I was doing. And I had all these questions. And at that time, you could just read books. You would read books on different things and on people's experiences. And then now here we are with the internet, and we're putting out all kinds of stories and experiences people have had in the near-death realm. And I do believe the saturation is, you're completely right. It's gotten to a point where um, people are listening to one experience and then they hear another experience that, although similarities exist within those experiences, there's some things that are different enough to alter their thoughts of, oh, maybe I was overthinking this, and I'm getting those kind of comments sometimes where they say, oh my God, I've been listening to so many of these now and blah, blah, blah. Okay,
Mhm.
that's not why I'm doing this. What I'm trying to do is bring awareness to people in
Mhm.
life who are stuck in this cycle, to
Mhm.
say, to stop for a moment and say, what is the big picture here? What is the big picture? And can I do that? Can I work with that instead of having my own near-death experience? Can I do these things before? Because again, if we're not healing ourselves, if we're not working towards happiness, health, and manifestation, things like that, we can lead ourselves into these unfortunate events. Now, some people have near-death experiences that I had a guy I just interviewed who had got struck by lightning. Maybe he
Mhm.
was supposed to. I don't know. Car accidents, things like that. You can't really help some of those things, but maybe that was part of their journey. But
Story.
yeah. So where did you run into a situation like this? Would you be on sharing that a little bit?
So let's distinguish between near death
Hmm.
and nearly dying. So just because you're struck by lightning, you are nearly dying on a physical level, but it's not necessarily a near-death experience. So a near-death experience is where you consciously come out of your body. And so if I briefly tell you, of course, there's backstories to everything, but if I briefly tell you, I was in a very unwell place, very physically, emotionally, psychologically unwell. I'd been through an extraordinary, extreme experiences, one on top of the other. And thank God I'm a fighter, because most people would have gone under. But I knew I needed to rest. So I was in bed in the day, resting. And then I came out of my body. And at the next moment, I've talked to somebody else who was interviewing me, and they've called it the angel with the clipboard, because the next moment I was talking to a very energetic being. And thankfully, with all of my education, I knew I wasn't losing my mind. So thank God for that. So, but I was definitely talking with an energy being, and we had a conversation. I said I'm very sick. He asked me if I wanted to leave the physical realm completely. I knew in reincarnation that you don't get out of this physical realm until you've learned all the lessons on your script. So I thought, what's the point in me going? He'll only put me back as a baby somewhere else, in another body somewhere else. So I might as well stay here. So we had a conversation about what was the purpose of me being here. And then I actually said to him, okay, send me back and I'll do everything I can to help people. But I am nearly dying. I'm technically I'm dead. And I don't know how to get physically well or mentally well or anything at the moment. And he kind of said, it's entirely your choice. And I saw my whole life in that moment, and I thought, I'll do that. I mean, what a legacy to go back and help people in this area. And this was now 20 years ago, so that's how long it was going on. I came back into my body, and I opened my eyes, and as I was talking with this angel, somebody had walked in the bedroom and put a cup of tea by the bed, but thought I was sleeping, so I'd left the room. And when I woke up, they came back in the room, and their very words were, "Oh, I put a cup of tea down there, but you were dead to the world."
Ah,
And yeah, truthfully, and I didn't tell them because they're not spiritually minded. And I
wow.
thought, yeah, I was, but I've just chosen to come back as well. Look at the state of me. I'm really sick. I'm ill. I can't even walk. Couldn't even put a fork in my mouth. My energy, I'd been zapped by a vampire, actually. Now I know that. I didn't know at the time. But it was just, and then it went from spiritual to mystical. And now you're up in the frequencies now. So you better know what psychopathology is. Like, if people have just a spiritual experience and they don't have the understanding or the reasoning or the reading, then they can come unstuck. But thank God that I've read all of these books. And again, I just thought, I can't tell people. I know I'm seeing beyond what other humans can see, but I also know I'm not going to waste my energy telling them I've got to get well. I've got to start helping people. I wasn't a teacher at the time, wasn't a lecturer, didn't have college, and ended up in hospital at some point. I was that sick. But that's a real near-death experience is where you come out of your body, but you are still your consciousness. And interestingly, you're still your personality as well. Because I've always been a bit of a fighter and I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word arse kicker. I don't take prisoners. Look, we haven't got room for rubbish, have we? We're all here to learn and to get our head around it and get it sorted.
So you came out of the body, had the experience. When you come back, did you automatically know how to heal yourself, or was this a no?
Took years. It took years. I always had that spiritual connection because I'd had the experiences. And so it really, I say sometimes it's another day at the office, another day at the spiritual office, but sometimes they send in the big guns, and this was a big gun.
Right.
So physically, no, I didn't really know how to heal. My diet was terrible at the time. And I'd been up in the higher realms of knowledge. And when you go up there, they say you are assessed by the strength of your enemy. And in going up into that, what I would call God consciousness. Just a rookie mistake, let me tell you. I didn't head for that. This was all circumstances that happened. You suddenly meet with the opposite of an angel, and now you've got to deal with that too. So I just prepare people that, there's a lot of people that I call them the love and light brigade. Be careful of the love and light brigade, because they are the kind of rookie spirituality, because they haven't yet met the shadow and darkness. And when you say that, people think, oh, she's very dark. But let's be real here. This is a dimension of energies. And it's not, let's skip through the daisies and ride unicorns. Right? You have a spiritual experience to help you with your real world. Well, let's call this the real world for now, experience. But let me just tell you, when you were talking and you reminded me, I've got a definition of the meaning of life. And a lot of people say, oh, nobody knows what it is. And they have arguments in philosophy. But I think I have, for me anyway, worked out what the meaning of life is. Definitely my life. It's to discover what is true through the observation and the introspection of what is not.
I love that. And it's because, how do you know dark without seeing light? How do you can't,
You can't. If you
can't.
like, I don't want to, like I say, enlightenment begins with endarkenment. And here's why. In your subconscious mind are all your traumas, wounds, and worries. And what's happening in the world today is it's coming forward into consciousness and then coming forward into reality. That's what we're seeing. That's why there's so many wars. It's the internal war being projected out. And so if you are raising your frequency, raising your consciousness, doing proper spiritual work, do you really think you're going to be let back into heaven with a whole mind full of junk? So, it's like a cupboard, isn't it? So we put all rubbish in the cupboard, life experiences when we're young. And then when we get to midlife, now they're all coming back out again. So it's your demons. That's what a demon is, by the way, just to normalize everything for people. A demon is an unhealed thought process made manifest plus energy. Now it takes form. So I won't tell you about alchemy. We'll save that for another chat.
No, but you know what? I just had someone who had an experience, and as she was coming out of her body, so she physically died on this plane, and as she was coming out of her body, she seen demon hands trying to grab her.
That's exactly what turns up.
And she saw these demon hands, and because she came from a religious background, all of a sudden there was this confusion and fear that came over her. Like, why am I seeing demon hands? I'm a religious person. Why am I seeing these things? And at some point during this experience, she was either communicated or discovered self that these hands, that was her own fear. That was her own dark thoughts and fears.
Yes.
And what she did is she released them and they dissolved. And she went, oh, that's it. Like it was kind of like, oh, that's what that was. And then she went on and had this experience that she had. But at first it didn't start great. It was this, she must have had this energy that was within her that was holding her, and that's how she manifested it, was these demonic hands or something.
And I do think it locks into your aura as well. So I do a lot of, my whole spiritual world really is private behind the scenes, apart from, podcasts like this. But I do a lot of cleansing, because people attach, energy attaches, and I can see energy moving that other people can't see. So, I might see a cloud of dark energy, which is negative energy, looking for somewhere to take up residence. And so, I don't want to take this too dark, but my point is being that if you really understand energy, you can't just, the yin and the yang symbol is black and white, isn't it? And within the white, there's black, and within the black, there's white. And you need to remember that. And I remember I have had some very frightening experiences with dark spirits. And I remember thinking, am I manifesting all this? Am I really dark? What's happening here? But then when I realized that they were thought forms, and not all mine, sometimes they're collective thought forms. And so I started dialoguing with it. And I remember being cross with it. I thought, don't come here frightening me. I'm actually a nice girl, good
Mhm.
person, doing my best. What have you turned up to frighten me for? I'm talking to God, go away. And it kind of smirked. And I
Right.
thought, yeah, the jig is up.
Right. Yeah. And especially if you're an empath or you're someone who is able to take on energy, if you're around other people with that, I've had to learn that myself. I have this thing I do where I don't know where I learned this or heard this, but it really works for me, is if I'm in a presence of someone who's really their energy's just
Mhm,
depleting and they're coming at me with that energy, I
mhm.
imagine a mirror around me, a circular
Nice.
mirror around me, and it reflects the energy back. And I've done this in my mind where this
Yeah.
person is going off and I put the mirror up. I'm just doing it mentally. And the next
Mhm.
thing you know, you can tell their demeanor starts to change.
Yeah.
They go from attacking to almost like, oh, I got to take a minute because they're reflecting their energy back. It's no longer engulfing into my energy. And
Mm.
that is, I don't know whether that is a, you know, the psychologist part of me says, oh, that's just I'm, I'm coming up with something. This is where this is why this is a fascinating talk because I'm talking to somebody who has had spiritual experiences through your life. And then you also have the psychology side of it. I'm the same way, but for some reason, I get hooked into the psychology side more. I'm very spiritual, but I
Mhm.
always try to make sense of everything from a psychological place. And it messes a little bit with my belief system because I have this belief of us going on. I talk to people every day about their near-death experiences, these experiences they're having beyond the physical form. And I know that while I'm hearing these experiences, sometimes I'll think, oh, but maybe it's because of this, this, and this. Maybe that's just the mind playing tricks. Like, why do we do that? Like, why am I
Well,
doing that?
because you're kind of yo-yoing between the conscious, rational, logical mind. Let's give it location in the brain. It's the prefrontal cortex. And
Mm,
then you're yo-yoing back into your subconscious mind, which is more childlike, which is why you could do the telekinesis when you were in child mind, because as an adult, you're now in consciousness. But reseed into the subconscious mind, whereas the dark forest, a lot of people don't want to go there. It's really
mm,
magical in there, but it's also quite terrifying if you don't know where to step properly. So what happens is our ego, and please, everybody, do not decay your ego. That's one of the terrible mistakes people in spirituality make. They try and meditate their ego to oblivion. And let me tell you, if you want to fast track to psychosis, do that. Collapse your
mm,
ego. Your ego actually monitors the wall around your mind. It's called the ego boundary. So this is known in psychoanalysis. So the ego boundary is around your mind. Now, midlife, what you're supposed to do is get your ego out of your driving seat and put it in your passenger seat. But here's the fight because it thinks, well, you've been useless in in protecting your mind for the first 30 years of your life. If you think I'm handing over your mind to you when you can't even drive. So again, this now we're going to Freud because he said this is the most energetically draining psychic experience you can have is the death of the ego.
mhm,
But do not let your ego die. Like put a hand out at the last minute and yank it into the passenger seat and promote it so that now you're not leading with your ego. Like I love my ego. It's saved my life so many times.
mm.
And if it's putting forward a defense mechanism, I let it, and then we have a chat why it did it later.
Right.
Because it's obviously picked up something that I was perhaps in a conversation and I hadn't quite picked it up, or it's picked up an energy that's come in. And then it's kind of made me prickly, or it's took me out of that. And then afterwards I do self-development journaling and I think, have I got some self-development to do? And then I talk to my ego and my inner child, and we have like a group meeting. And so when you're using that mirror around you, if I now talk about in Jungian theory, he thinks the best way forward is an active imagination, which you've got and I've got.
Right.
Like we'd have so much fun talking about like what's like even in the supermarket, what's really happening? Well, I can see this happening. It's not you're not losing it, you're playing with it.
Right. Yeah.
Playing with it. I mean, my thesis for my master's was on the function of humor, the
Mm,
role that humor plays. And when I said I met that very, very dark demon, and I went up to him, I was really cross. And I said, right, I know you're going to kill me. I know I'm dying, but why? I want to know why.
Mm,
I haven't done anything. I want to know, give me the answer. And I thought he put his hands behind his back, and I thought he was bringing out the dagger of all daggers, and I was about to lose my head, or yes, in the films. But actually, he brought out what I didn't know at the time was it was like I'd describe it as like a circular maze, and I woke up from a dream that wasn't a dream, and I felt every cell in my body was tingling, and I didn't know for years, probably 10, 15 years. And then I was studying mandalas, and I saw this eternal maze, and apparently it's the where people try and get to in spirituality. But let me tell you, I come from like a not spiritual place, so I didn't know this was a goal to try and get to. But I'd argued with this demon and had the
mm,
audacity to question why he'd turned up, and he showed me this, and I now know it's a level of realization that I'd kind of bungled into.
right.
But so when I
That is your own demon, right? That is your own.
I think he felt like the collective demon, to tell you the truth, because at the
Okay.
time, yeah. And then there are some darker ones, come up with teeth and everything, teeth and hair. But those ones, they manifest in other people. They honestly do. I mean, I'm sorry if this sounds a little bit difficult to hear, but especially, because then it's only energy, you see. And once you know that here's the thing to always ask yourself. Let's say worst case scenario, you're having an extreme spiritual experience, this dark thing turns up, it manifests right in front of you, not in a dream, not in a near-death experience, in the supermarket,
Hmm.
manifests in front of you, and you're locked in some kind of oh my god situation, and no, everybody's carrying on with their shopping, and you think, am I really losing it? Here's the question to ask yourself. Why did I write this in to my story?
Hmm. Right. See,
So when
but that's you're using instead of having fear overtake you, you're having a I want to say logical. I don't know if that's the right word, but you're having a you're almost creating more of a dialogue to question why that has come up in your life.
Mhm.
That's a very difficult thing to do if you're having a demonic type experience or a low energy experience, right?
what what
is
else
it
are you
what?
going to do? What are you going to do? Get out the holy water? Because let me tell you, if you start chucking things at a demon, that's one way to really make it cross, and you'll only
Mhm.
give it energy, and they can then
Yes.
manifest and do all that. So you go
Mhm.
the opposite way. You say, right, you've turned up in my house first of all, and you will be leaving in 2 seconds, but not before you've told me why you've turned up. What can I take from this negotiation with something? I could disappear into fear and terror right now, but I'm not, because I've got a lot of knowledge. So I'm going to do something different. If I've written the story of my life and God sent me here to learn something, and this demon has turned up, is that God? Is that God in the opposite because I'm being tested at high frequencies? Can
Mhm.
I love that way? Can I take its energy? Oh, yes, 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 and yes, is the answer to all of those questions.
Yeah, and a lot of the things you're saying, again, I've really studied near-death experiences. When I say that, I mean I've read books and books on this
Mm,
stuff. And I've also not only just read about all the loving experiences in heaven with waterfalls and butterflies and all that, and that's all
mm,
great, right? I've also read of the darker side of things where people go into a place that we would, I
mm,
guess, call hell,
mhm,
and they're going through the process and it's terrible and there's a lot of bad things. But the moment they start to there's been a number of times where I don't know, I can't bring somebody's experience out that I've read, but I just know this from my own readings, is they at some point come to this point of what is the purpose of what I'm going through here? Like why
mm,
am I here? What is this?
mm,
So it starts with that. Then it's this feeling of, well, I don't need to be here. I don't need to be here. And then it's
mm,
like call out to something greater than that. Like say that, and all of a sudden that light comes and
mm,
they whisk off and they say, okay,
mm.
so if there was this terrible demonic entity that was going to just destroy us in the afterlife, I don't think we'd be able to just wish it away. Or
this is the afterlife, just to wake everybody up, right? This is as hell as it gets, right? You're down here
right.
because your soul has become imperfect. Your
Mm,
soul, by the way, is your subconscious mind. Okay, so when you see your mind as your soul, now it's, oh, right, so I've got just also I'll say on the word sin, it's an archery term. It was hijacked by religion. It just means to fall short of the mark. So
right.
no hellfire, no brimstone, no flames, no nothing like. So in your mind you have traumas, you have programs, and you have fears, and all of those things need correcting.
Mm,
That's why you're here. You're here to perfect. That's what perfect is. It's perfect where you go back into your mind and you find something else that needs updating, and then you work and deal with that and you get rid of it, you take the energy, and then there's peace. So you just keep doing that until you perfect your soul, which is your mind.
mhm.
And so when you meet these experiences, well, the question what I always ask myself is, and let me tell you, I've had some horrible experiences, and I think, why, God, why have I, why have you sent me into this? Why have I manifested this? I don't think I deserve this. The humanness comes in. So what is this experience? And I was in something not too long ago, surrounded by seven, what other people call seven demons. And it was very frightening. It was real. It was really happening. You'd have seen it in real world people. But I was looking at it as an energy thing. And I thought, what is this horrible experience for? And then I thought, it's initiation. Here's here's a mass of energy that is beyond me. But is it beyond me? Because if I call in, like if God created everything and he must like me because I saw him when I was 5. So why don't I ask him to come in and sort this rubbish out
Right.
while I get my head around what impossible thing can I learn from this terrible experience? What could I possibly learn from this? And you stay in that until an angel or a spirit turns up or your own intuition turns up and you get the answer until you do it differently,
Mm,
until you see that differently, until you choose differently, until you realize that our life is a top-down experience, not a bottom-up.
right.
Because consciousness is before physical life. I
Mhm,
mean, let's just go back into child psychology, like womb memory. You're conscious in the womb before you've been born,
mhm.
so that you're recording memories inside the womb, and you inherit. You manifest in a womb, but you've already come in with DNA. I've got videos on carbon DNA inheritance that I've made, and so when you're born, you're not a baby. You're already born with all knowledge, but you're also born with things that need perfecting. And that might not be you, it might be your ancestors,
Mhm.
some healing that needs to be done. If you're just going to keep your head down, go into the machine, live life, and die, you've kind of missed the lesson,
The point.
missed the point.
Would it be safe to say that every experience you have is a learning experience, that each experience we need to be more aware of the purpose of the experience in order to make the right decision or have the right so you have an
With the
experience
right
come into your
attitude,
life and a lot of times when we have an experience come into our life, we react
yeah.
based
I'm not
on
going to.
the past,
I'm not
but
going to pretend I don't react. I do. I'm a
right,
fighter.
because that's part of this human experience, right? But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is maybe partially part of the experience and this lesson to be here in this world is to learn is to be more aware of our reactions. And if because our reactions are going to probably change a lot of the outcome, I would assume. Because
Well,
if we're constantly manifesting, then the reaction I'm having based on this experience could also lead to another experience. Like we have to keep
it will
learning
keep
the,
coming. It
yeah,
will keep coming round until you've learnt the lesson. And let me tell you, if
right.
you don't learn that lesson, next time it comes around, it's going to be bigger.
Yes.
Because it's like spirits are saying, for the love of God, are you not paying attention?
Mhm.
We've brought this experience round. You've talked to your friends about it. You've decided it's the other person's fault, and then a month's time, it's happened again, but now it's worse. And you think, oh my God, been here before. Like if you ever have, we could talk about deja vu. Oh my God, so exciting. But I just mean on a practical, real world level, if you've been here before, then you're missing a lesson. It's the same with people when they say to me, oh, I keep having this recurring dream, Carole, what's going on? When I decode the symbolism in it, it's your subconscious mind is trying to help you, actually, you know.
Mm.
And what if people say, oh, the world, the state of the world, and how could God let this happen? Well, he didn't let this happen. We 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 did this. But if
Mm.
you go to that higher level of consciousness, connect with your spiritual world, ask them, ask them, do some reflection, and then just do the best you can.
Are we all imperfect souls then here?
I think we've kind of, well, if I use humor again, we kind of got kicked out of heaven because we were a bit muddy in the back office. And
Right.
so, and we're not all the same. When people say, oh, nobody's perfect, that's a matrix mantra, right?
Hmm.
Because we're in different stages of perfection, actually. I think we're born perfect. We're heavily programmed out of it, terribly programmed, and in school and education and then other people. And then already the souls that are kind of stuck and trapped here, they'll do some heavy old programming like, oh, you must be losing it if you think you've had a near-death experience. Go and see your doctor, get on some medication and get back to work.
Right.
They're matrix mantras. You haven't lost it. You've written into your story, it's been written into your story to have a spiritual experience. Please sit still with that long enough to ask yourself, what is heaven trying to help me out with here? Why did that
Mm.
happen? Don't just
Mm.
have it and say, oh, I've spoke to Jesus, everybody, and Jesus, because, you soon get dismissed, actually. Have some credibility about it. Go and actually do speak to Jesus and ask him, uh, how can I navigate this?
Why would you say for people like, and maybe you can relate to the way I've been, but even as a child, I've said this many times before, I would always look around and be quite confused as to the behavior of the other kids. If they were making fun or fighting and these types of things, I would get really confused. I would feel bad for them. I'd feel sad. Even as a young child, I didn't understand why this was going on. I'm not saying I'm perfect because as an adult, I've made some different decisions and had to learn some different lessons. But I did always feel like I was just a little different. It's the only word I want to say, in regards to the general population. Why are there souls like
Yeah.
that here? Like why would I come and do this again if I already seen the things that aren't necessarily the right thing to do?
Well, just to give you an everyday answer so that we can create a podcast and talk about it and help other people.
Okay.
But
Right.
I also remember when I was born, I remember just being, I don't know that I've ever got over the disappointment of being born
Yeah.
because I had, well, it's a whole nother thing. It really did happen. I had an argument with an angel and I didn't even want to come here. And I said, I'm not coming, but well, apparently I was. Um, but anyway, I'll have a word when I get back to heaven, if I can find that angel that shoved me down here. Um, but I remember, let's just talk every day. I remember the trauma and the violence that I was born into, as well as having to deal with that at a physical level. I remember being so upset, and I still am upset. Why isn't it a party down here? Why aren't we all having fun?
Mm.
Why aren't we all brothers and sisters? Why can't we love each other? Why can't why do you have to hate me? Why? And so in academia, I've got the root cause of racism actually, and I will publish that video one day, but people aren't anywhere near ready to hear what the
Mm.
truth about that is. Um, People need to hate somebody because it's negative energy they can't stand to have in their own mind. So it's called projective identification. They take that negative energy, project it onto somebody who looks different to themselves, split it off, and say that person over there, I hate them. But the truth is, no, what you've done is you've projected out the part of your own self, your own wounds that you can't manage. You've projected them into somebody else because otherwise you've got hate in your head.
Mm. So it's a
So
way, so
yeah,
it's in a sense, it's a way to release
Yeah,
It's giving an excuse or a reason to release it, and you're projecting it into somebody else just to,
yeah.
yeah. Wow.
But I similarly looked at violence here, and I still do. And, if I was teaching in a secondary school of 30 children in my class, and I looked and I could have just cried because I looked and I thought, all the damage that's been done to their minds already. How can I? And so I decided to be one, authentic, two, don't tell anybody what they must believe.
Hmm.
Uh, Three, drop in seeds of truth, because when you hear truth, your mind knows it.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what your belief system is. When somebody says a truth, your mind, your soul, that reverberates, and you can't get that out because you think, oh, damn it, I want to argue with them, but actually something is telling me, they're telling me the truth.
Hmm. Right.
I've been on both sides of that. I've been on the receiving end of that, and as a teacher, and I kind of drop it in and I pretend that I haven't.
Right. Right. Do you work with people now? Like, do you help people with their the inflictions they have on themselves in their life? Like, I would assume that's where you're kind of helping people, is to become more aware of the parts of them that they're not aware of. Is that what you
Well,
do?
yeah. So when I had that conversation with the angel, and I came here, and then I had to find a different career, so I just ended up in a school. And then somebody said, "Oh, you should be a teacher," and I said, "Well, don't be so ridiculous. It's not interesting me at all." But then the next year, I trained to be a teacher because, well, I needed the money apart from anything else. Um, but um, but then I realized, hold on, Carole, you're with you're with God's babies. So what can I give them? What information can I give the children so that when they leave me in a year's time, they take that through life? And then I went into adult education and I thought, hold on, these people are all wounded as well. What can I do? How can I help them? And so let's say I was teaching ordinary psychology, but there wouldn't be a lesson where I didn't drop in a high frequency piece of truth. It wasn't on the curriculum, but it was on my curriculum.
Hmm.
It's on that spiritual angels curriculum. And then I thought, thankfully, I then released myself from caring what other people think. So I thought, no, if God's put me down here to be bold, uh, to speak, I've just been through university and survived all those professors that tried to stop me talking. And I've just met a demon. So like, what's left? So so if I can So now I'm completely free. I'd say I'm a really free woman because I'm completely free to not. There's no room for opinions in this world, right? If you haven't got all the knowledge, you can't have an opinion. It's embarrassing, right? So the only person with all the knowledge is God. So there's no room for opinions, but there's room for us to say, this happened to me. Um, I understand if you see that differently to me. I'm not precious about that. I'm just sharing my knowledge. And what I do now, so my whole college is online now, so I've got about 70 videos on YouTube of a variety of subjects, some in depths forensic, very sciencey, and then one in telepathy and hearing voices. So I'm contacted by people who really are too scared to go to the doctors, or they know that something's happened, they know people won't understand them, or they've been battling with a problem for years. And now I'm finding more and more that I'm doing online coaching. I call it a power hour because you can come in with 10, 20, 30 years worth of problems and 1 hour with me, and you'll see this whole world differently.
Wow. What is the name of the school that you run?
Oh, so online now, it's progressed. It's now College of the Mind. But if you put my name in, then it will come up. Um, if you put my name into YouTube, it will come up. And so there's nothing anyone, there is two things. Firstly, I've not met a mind that I don't understand. So people say, oh, you should be in my mind, it's crazy. And I think, no, it's not actually. It's just another car, just a different type of car.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to tell me, oh, and this happens and that happens, and a really weird thing happens. And I'm going to think, it's another day at the office. So we move through that. So there's not a mind that I've not understood. And I dealt with psychopaths, and I've dealt with very spiritual people and ordinary people. I've never met a mind that I didn't understand. And it just doesn't faze me.
Right.
Just doesn't.
But the other thing that I've picked up from you is that, and it's something I just wrote this thought down in my mind as you were talking because I believe it too. And it was that true learning begins when you lose the fear of asking questions. And I say that because as you said, professors, wanted you to probably, most people are told how to teach or what to teach or the curriculum to teach. But if there is regulations and rules around what you're saying, then there's rules and regulations about what questions can be asked too, because you can only answer a question a certain way. And what I'm saying is true learning begins when you lose the fear of asking questions.
Yeah.
So if you can ask any question, that's where you learn,
And you
right?
ask me any question, and you'll get a proper sensible answer,
Right.
because I'll either draw on I'll draw on different disciplines to give you a sensible answer and make sense of what's going on for you. So where
Mhm.
I can go forward where the professors can't, even because they don't want to lose their job and their pensions, and academia's just got a threshold, and don't you coming in here having silly ideas about there being a whole another dimension of consciousness.
Right.
So I went to university and recorded the video on the 7 levels of consciousness. I used the
Really?
facility. They didn't even know. I used the facility and recorded it, and then posted it up on YouTube. And I drove home laughing because I thought, you tried to stop me. You're never going to stop me. Nobody can stop me now.
Right.
Nobody can stop me now.
Wow.
Um, because I also think that I'm much more powerful out of my body. So I'm not even scared of
Right.
dying. I'd just be
Right.
cross if some twit tries to do that before I'm ready to go. But even so, I've already done that. I've already created the legacy, and
Right.
I've got tons of free stuff on my website too to
What is the
help people.
web? Can I get the website? That way I
So
can
the,
find
yeah,
it.
the website is, if you put my name in, Carole Sawo, or type in College of the Mind. Depends what mood Google's in.
Mm.
And it will bring it up. But there's nothing you can ask me that I wouldn't understand and probably haven't already experienced, or can help you understand it. And I think
Wow.
that's what's great about these type of podcasts is, um, we're kind of unleashed, aren't we? Because we can now
I
talk about anything.
I keep saying it through different conversations I'm having. We couldn't have this conversation 50 years ago. And the reason I say that the way I'm saying it is because if in that small amount of time, and really in retrospect of how large our existence will be, is where are we in 300 years?
Well, we're not actually here.
But I mean,
um,
from the physical place, what is the evolution of humans in 300 years? If in the last
yeah,
50, we went from being told to not say a word to now questioning everything, right?
it's great to question everything, but you've got to make sure you're the right teacher to get the answers, right? And
Mm.
and there's a whole soup of the, people that everybody's now a psychologist, aren't they? And everybody, like, if crystals, vibrational frequencies, colors, this kind of thing, they're nice, but all third dimensional.
Yeah.
Um, and spiritual experience, you go up into a spiritual experience, as your guests have, proper spiritual, and then you go even higher into mystical experiences. And you've got to learn how to navigate that.
And then it goes back to the even you saying earlier, this idea of people are trying to teach people to lose the ego. We don't want to lose our ego. That's the part of the human experience. We're here. We need the ego. I mean, yeah, I know what it's like. People have explained what it's like to take ayahuasca. Your ego disappears and you have a psychosis. It almost feels like you're having psychosis.
Well, you
So
will
if
have a
you
psychosis
right,
because
right,
you've come out, because your castle is not being, you've got nobody around the boundary of your castle. I mean, do they think God's made a mistake in giving us an ego? And just to go back to
yes,
Latin, ego means I, means, get a dictionary. Ego means I, and I means God. So it's the kind of mini God. And when sometimes the ego can spiritualize itself. So when people have near death experiences, they haven't got the foundation. So when they come back in their body, their ego kind of hijacks and says, right, I'm now God. I'm hijacking that experience.
mm.
Their ego now thinks it's God because it's had a spiritual experience.
Wow,
But
that's great.
really,
I've Never had anyone explain it that way. That makes sense. Not
Oh
everyone's
yeah.
had that, but that is something that can happen when they come back because
Oh
they
my God.
they feel the power of what they had, and now they're online again with their ego, and it gets mixed
Yeah.
together. That makes
Spiritualized.
perfect
The ego
sense.
has spiritualized itself. This is what I mean. It can't be in the driver's seat with this stuff. You've got to give it so have the conversation. Yes, so I've been up, I've spoke to God. I'm at that higher frequency. I've had extreme spiritual experience, genuine ones. But you come back in your body and your ego says, where have you been? Where do you think you've been? I'm
Mhm.
hijacking all of that because you actually haven't even got a clue what's going on in your mind. I've been doing all your defense mechanisms for you all of your life.
Mhm.
If I, get back in the back seat, that's the initial conversation with the ego. And you see it online, and I mean, you see it in religious sects. People have a near-death experience. They might go into hospital. Men typically have a heart operation, and their ego doesn't like it because it questions the mortality. So when they come back in their hospital bed, they've got to come to terms with the fact that they nearly physically died. A male mind, not to stereotype, but it struggles with mortality more than perhaps the female mind, unless you're very creative. And so I've seen it when I'm teaching forensics in religious sects. They have a near-death experience. They come back in, their ego hijacks it. Now it's spiritualized itself. Now they'd start a sect and say, I'm the voice of the Lord. So, no, you're the voice of your ego that had a Lord experience, but you don't know the difference between you, self, and
Mhm.
ego, self.
Right.
Your ego's got a function to play in your mind, but you have an appointment with God. It's
Mhm.
not your ego. And so you see it online all the time, don't you? And sometimes I do little cheeky, has your ego spiritualized? Because nobody's even fathomed that that's a possibility. And why? Because they haven't been doing the groundwork as well as the sky work.
What would you recommend to someone listening? This would be to the person who hasn't had the near-death experience. This is just someone who's spiritually seeking. This is a spiritual seeker,
Mhm.
and they're trying to not have their ego because again, if we're all out there learning to get rid of our egos and meditate and dissolve the ego and all that, I'm in agreement with you that I don't think that's correct. I'm a musician. I need some kind of ego. Otherwise, I'm just sitting around. Uh, because there's so many different pieces of your ego that are
Yeah.
intact. Are there negative points to ego? Absolutely. And so I guess the question is, what can we be doing in our life, our daily life,
Mhm.
to be moving towards a healthier version of ourselves in regards to our ego?
Okay. So you need to own your experiences. You need to own all of this. Whatever your experience is, own it. I'd say for anybody that's new into the spiritual world, walk slowly, right? You're going to be amazed by crystals and frequencies and colors and oh my God. I mean, I'm giving a talk in a couple of weeks' time at one of these spiritual fairs, and it's a whole different language. And, it's fun because I go downstairs and they're selling all the dream catchers and they're doing Reiki and all of that, which is lovely. There's space for that. Walk through that slowly, and and only you, make your mind up. Get in contact with your own spiritual guide. You're not losing it, you're getting it. Get in contact so that you've got an internal dialogue that's intuition, where you say, is this good for me or not? Or what am I supposed to be learning here or not? Then you do your own homework. So my homework is childhood trauma. I've been working on that for years, getting rid of that, coming to terms with it, extracting the lesson and the meaning from it. Every day I sit quietly and self-reflect. Um, and so the answer is you walk slowly, but you do some gentle things. So you inquire into all this spiritual text. Please also study some core psychology to keep you nice and grounded and enjoy it. Create a dialogue with your own spiritual guide. Keep an open, well, when I say keep an open mind, I don't mean when people say I'm open, I think don't be. It's like how many chakras do you want open? Because you're just going to be things are just going to navigate towards all of your chakras and live in there. Don't go out with all your chakras open.
Right.
Close them down. Right. When people say, "Oh, I'm really open," I think, "Oh no, boundaries. Oh my God." Have a look on my YouTube channel. Most essential boundaries. You see, your ego monitors your boundaries.
Okay.
You've got to be able to say no, because when you go up into the higher spiritual experiences, you'll go into temptation. Now, my temptation is going to be different to your temptation, but let's say everything in the spiritual world knows where you can be tempted. It knows where your weaknesses are. So if we're being tested here, you've got to know where people can get you, and tempt you, whether it's pornography or drugs, or tempt you into an argument, or even talking about politics and religion. You need to see that as a potential temptation, as an energy hemorrhage. So if you're talking to somebody of the same intellect as yourself, have the conversation. But if they're not, they're just looking for a fight, that's an energy hemorrhage waiting to happen. So it's not even about the fight, it's about the energy extraction.
Right.
So just walk slowly, walk gently, explore everything, keep really tightly connected with your true self. Listen, watch, experience, but then you and only you decide. And that's between you and God.
Yeah, I love that. When you spoke about the boundaries, that's a big one too, because especially as you get down, you get more spiritual, you get more into your own place, you open yourself up, and you open yourself up a little bit too much, then you're in trouble. So you're right. You have to know your boundaries. I can relate to some of the things you're saying, even in the music world of things. Music is very spiritual, and you can get very lost in this. And then the other thing of people just taking advantage of you, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So one of the things I was going to ask you, you keep mentioning about being in touch with your spiritual guide. Is that your higher self? Is that just trusting your intuition? You hear this spiritual guide type thing. A lot of people say, "Oh, I listen to my spiritual guides," or "I have a spiritual guide named Aztec," or
they name us, don't they? Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
name mine.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but is that our, if we feel something or we think something and we feel it, okay, is that our guide, or is it
Yeah.
bigger than that?
So you know how people have different near-death experiences. People will interpret experiences differently according to their belief system and their prior programming, this kind of thing. So when I say, some people would call them higher guides, sometimes it does make me smile, because we want to keep it grounded at some point here. So when you're praying, I'm not saying, I just state my position, probably should have done it an hour ago, but I'm not religious, but I am absolutely believe in God, because I speak to him, I've seen him, I know him. I don't believe in him, I know him. I have no interest in religion, because I think that's a detractor. But so let's say you're praying is just, you could be sitting with a cup of tea saying, "Oh God, look what's just happened. How am I going to navigate this? How am I going to get through this day? Even how am I going to get through the next hour?" That's when I would have the conversation. So you say it as a human, how in this hell am I going to get through this? What am I supposed to be learning? I don't know that I can cope. You're going to have to help me. So you put the request up.
Okay.
And then you just pay attention to your awareness. So for some people, they'll say they actually hear a voice. I have heard actual spiritual voices speaking, but I've also heard, let me distinguish between what is a genuine spiritual voice and what is one that you want to tell to go away. A genuine spiritual guide will never direct you. They don't talk in paragraphs, they talk in half sentences. So instead of saying, "Well, Carole, I think you should do this, do that, and the other," they never say that. They'll say something like, "Is that your interpretation?" And you think, "Oh my God, now I've got to think about that."
So
Or
they ask questions that direct
they
you
might
in the
just drop
direction.
something in. They might just drop something in. Like even today, I was driving and I wanted to get somewhere to my appointment and then come back and not be late for our appointment. And so I didn't know which way to go. Traffic works all over the place. So I said, "Which way shall I go?" And they said, "Take the right path." And I thought that's quite hilarious, isn't it? Because we should always take the right path.
Right, right.
So I
That's
did actually
funny.
take the right path.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, and that got you here on time, so that's perfect. So,
Yeah.
so not being fooled into like this is what you like, because that we don't even know if that's our mind or what that is that's telling us
Don't
directly.
worry too much. Like,
Hmm.
you said about getting confused. They'll always give you two things. So let's say you walk past the television and it turns itself off. And then
Hmm.
you walk back, it turns itself back on. If you go to an electrician, say, oh, it's faulty wiring. If you tell somebody else, they say, oh, you're not having a spiritual experience. But actually, in the spiritual world, that is how they communicate with you, by turning lights off and on and this kind of thing. And so what they do is they do two things. So you can use your logical mind if you want. You say, oh, we need to get a new television. Or you can say, hold on, I think something's trying to speak to me.
Hmm.
Or I'll just say hi, or, we haven't even scratched the surface of some of the experiences that I've had. But I dialogue. I dialogue, get the lesson, and then say, oh, thanks for coming by. So you get to, so I think don't be confused, because don't force it don't try and file it into a preconceived file in your mind.
Hmm.
I've had experiences that did happen that very few people on earth would be able to hear. And I tried many years ago, oh, what happened there? Oh, I need to find an answer to that. What happened there? I need to file it in my head. My ego's struggling. I'm struggling to make sense of that. And then it just occurred to me, why don't you just try not to make sense of it?
Hmm. Yeah, and then you're in flow. We're constantly trying to control everything. That I completely agree with that. And I think that ultimately what we're all trying to get to is that feeling of being, I get that when I play music, right? There's
Mm,
moments where I just tap into it and I'm gone. And it's
yeah,
2, 3 hours later and I go, how did I just do that? What just happened? If I could live my life like that constantly, that'd be great. But then I also
we
don't like,
can.
yeah, right. And I can if I can get out of my own way, or if we can
Well,
get
it
out of
says
our
it
own
in the
way.
Bible, doesn't it? Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. And what that means is that's not a let's go to church and just talk about that. It's a directive. It's a spiritual directive. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is the highest state of consciousness. So instead of getting in the morning, getting up and getting your coffee and getting tangled up in the world and trying to make sense of everything, seek you first your highest state of consciousness. Seek you first your
Mhm.
intuition before you make your coffee. Or I'm a bit of a coffee girl, actually. So let's say you've made your coffee. Sit down for a minute. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. That means manifest your day. That means connect with whatever that higher intelligence, that higher consciousness, and ask the questions and create your day from there. And then you have your shower and you have your day. Seek ye first your kingdom of heaven, your kingdom of heaven.
Wow.
Your kingdom, when you're playing your music, you're in your kingdom of heaven.
Hmm.
So you see, it's easy to be spiritual in a spiritual place, isn't it? A yoga retreat. And that, mind you, you wouldn't catch me anywhere near one of those now because I know how energy pulls.
Hmm.
Um, but it's easy to be spiritual in a spiritual place. Our task is to be free and spiritual in this non-spiritual place, in this tough world.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
how are you going to do that? You're going to do that by, in the beginning of the day, going back to your kingdom of heaven,
Hmm.
a
I feel
place in
like,
your mind.
yeah, I feel like you're also touching on, sometimes I'm always talking about music as my meditation. And I ask people, oh, how can we meditate better? And I go into these things. Um, Meditation is just a word. And what you're saying is you're waking up and you're becoming aware and you're going, that is meditation in a
That is
sense, right? You're meditating.
meditation. You haven't got to sit down in a yogic position and hurt your legs and your back and have candles. I mean,
Right.
if you want to, you can, and I do
Hmm.
sometimes. But what's important is to live in sort of meditation. To meditation means to become aware. You become aware of your day before it started. I don't
Hmm.
check my emails first of all. I create first of all.
Yeah.
And then like go back home first and then call heaven into here, because heaven is everywhere, isn't it? Heaven is everywhere. And if you want to live a truly mystical, magical life, then why not create one in your head first? And then I mean, follow me around, you'll see magic happen.
I
I
love
have
that.
literally walk into a lecture with a magic wand. That's how fun my
Really?
lectures are.
So it's like Harry Potter. You're at
It's
the
definitely
School of
Harry Potter.
Magic. I love
Why
that.
not? Let's have some fun. People have lost the magic because they've tried to make it into science. If you don't believe in magic, then you won't have a magical life.
And why do people love that movie and that series?
Well,
Why
because
do
it
you
touches on
Yeah.
our archetypes. Because in your subconscious mind, you have the archetype of the wise old man, the archetype of the young orphan, the archetype of any possibility. Look, I wrote this down the other day. Miracles are possibilities made manifest. So where I create miracles, and look, there's plenty of things that I have to deal with that aren't pleasant and miraculous, but there are plenty of things that if I project in a miracle, then I watch a miracle happen. I mean, spectacularly, like you can get rid of situations that you can't possibly think how you can get rid of this situation or deal with this situation. So when you've met the impossible, you think, I'm in an impossible position. That is exactly, whether you're spiritual or not, that's exactly when you go back to heaven, to God, to whichever you call it, source, and you say, I need a miracle. And a miracle is where the universe maneuvers situations around, moves the chessboard down here to make possible what you, with your human mind, knew was impossible. So
Mm.
I live in the impossible. So I wake up and just like everybody else, like, oh my God, I'm awake, I'm alive. What have I got to do today? That's the possible, that's the logical, and that's the matrix. So you have to say, hold on a minute, even if you write yourself a note by the bed, what miracles do I want to manifest today? What do I want to make possible? Now, don't forget, you're not making it possible. The universe is going to make it possible. You're just
Mhm.
going into child mind where you're going to say, okay, let me stand back and watch this. And sometimes it's hilarious.
And so
Like somebody,
you've personally had these things manifest
oh,
things in
oh
your life.
almost every day.
Wow.
Even an hour ago, there was some noise happening in the neighborhood. I wanted our talk to be noise free because you're recording.
Hmm.
So I can't go out in the neighborhood and stop all of that. So I put the request up. Put the request up. God, can you sort that noise out for me? And then I said the mantra, there's no noise. We have a perfect meeting. And where has it gone? It's gone.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything.
We haven't heard
That's
it.
that's unbelievable. I love that. I love that. One of the you've touched on this in the beginning, and was one of the last questions I always ask everybody, and it's I think you said it perfect earlier, but maybe you'll say it again and maybe you'll dig into it a little bit deeper. But if if you could give a description or a reason, the true reason why we come here, what would that be? What is the reason for our incarnation?
God gives you life and he gives you free will and he gives you plenty of time.
Hmm.
And then you can do whatever, and he's watching. And our integrity is tested not when we're in company, but when we're on our own, because the angels still watch. That's how I learned that. Um, he's not going to tell you unless you ask what you should do. He's just going to hope you make the right choices and go back to him. He's going to send people into this physical realm like me, like you, who say, why don't you not get caught up in religion? Why don't you just go and have a chat with God? Why don't you, in America, there's the Will and Grace television program. That actually comes from a quote by Buber, which is, if you thought you heard the voice of God, would you have the will to go after it and the grace to listen? And that's the problem. People are scared. Would you have the will to go after it and the grace to listen? because you might hear some things that you've got to do some homework.
Mm.
Have you got the courage? Have you got the courage, even if you're scared? Go scared, go small, go humble, go bold, just go and have a chat. Because what we're doing here is, so if you take my theory of the mind, it's not my theory that the mind's the soul, actually, but if you take my imagery that you're here to tidy up your mind, to get rid of the traumas, to get rid of the programs, to create a healthy, the Garden of Eden is your mind, but it's just got weeds everywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
So go back into that, clean up your mind, and just do the best you can do. You've not got to be an angel. I'm not I'm not sometimes I can kick off, and just do the best you can do down here. But at every opportunity, don't let a day go past where you don't say to yourself, firstly, every day I say to myself, well done, Carole. Because it's tough, isn't it, down here?
Yeah.
I give a lecture, I say, well done, Carole. When we finish this podcast, I'm going to make a coffee. I'm going to say, well done, Carole, because I gave it my best. And hopefully people will get things from it. I don't mind if they don't. I'm not attached to it. So you're here to, I said, the meaning of life, to discover what is true through the observation. So watch other people, watch it all play out, but just be an observer of it all. And disagree with the things you disagree with, have the courage to say, I don't think I'm going to take, like you might lose a friend group, I don't think I'm going to take those drugs. I'm going to say no. I don't know what that means, because now I'm going to be on my own, but I'm not going to be on my own because I'm with this whole nother universe of all these wonderful spirits that love me. So in fact, I'm not on my own. So observe life and then introspect, go back into your mind and think to yourself, if I wrote my story, if I sat down with an angel before I come here and he said, well, you've got to learn this, to tidy up your mind, you're going to have this quite difficult experience. So it's not all going to be fun, but you can bring some magic in whenever you want. Just keep asking yourself, why did I write this experience in? Have I done the best I can do today, given who I am and what I've been given? Did I go out of my way to hurt people, or did I actually try and help? And when I leave here, I've done the legacy that I promised the angel when I was in the near-death experience. I've done that 20 years. I've not even charged for most of it, whereas a lot of people would have. It's all there, it's all free. When I die, I've lived a life where I explored all of this world and other dimensions that people are just only now starting to question. And I left a legacy. So, well done, Carole, but also you should be doing that in your world. Your music you're going to leave behind, that's a legacy. You put that, immortalize it here. And not because we probably won't get the credit while we're here, but somebody will come behind and say, just even from this podcast, thank God those two people had the courage and made the effort and discussed this topic today, because something me and you have said today, I hope, will help somebody who I probably will never even meet.
Right.
What a wonderful thing.
That's why I love doing this. It lights me up every time I talk to someone, and I love this. I definitely am going to be trying to see if I can get you back on, because we didn't even dig into a lot of what I wanted to talk about. I knew we would go into a different direction, but we did talk a little bit about your near-death experience, but I know there's a lot more that has happened in your life. I'm happy with the way this went, and I know the audience will get something out of it. So I really appreciate you being here. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I always turn to the guests and say, please continue to share these experiences. Like we've talked about, if someone else can get something out of it, that's the whole purpose. That's why we're doing this. So like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Soul Inspired. So